I have a friend in Poland, and I have a check 1 2. A check 1 2. Oh, no? Tough crowd. That's noted. All right. Well, welcome. Welcome to Bible study, looking at Judges chapter 8 this evening. Wonderful to have everybody here. We're getting some good crowds over the spring here. That free drawing, the free manual labor drawing for the privilege of working for the church and some, yes? I took the liberty of putting your name in a few times. Yeah. Y'all bow your heads with me. Let's open the evening with a word of prayer. Father God, we are so thankful for these evenings. We're genuinely thankful to be able to come here together, to open up your word, to commune with our fellow Christians and to commune with you, God. We ask that this evening would be spent praising your name, glorifying your holy word and the wisdom therein, edifying the brethren, God, that you would genuinely change us through these evenings together, that you would grow this church, not just in number, but in love for one another, in love for your word, in knowledge, and in communion with the Holy Spirit. God, we ask that you would make us into the Christians you would have us to be. And we know, God, that the foundation for that is in your holy word. So, God, keep our ears and our minds and our hearts open this evening. In your name we pray. Amen. So, Judges chapter 8 this evening. Now, looking back at chapter 7, we remember chapter 7. Gideon was about to attack the Midianites. God said, you got too many people, took him down to a body of water there. All the men gathered water. Seems like it might have been in the heat of the day. Some of them threw themselves down and started drinking it with their face, and some of them kneeled down and were taking it by their hand and lapping it to their face, using their hand. And those that used their hand, it was 300 soldiers. And God said, you take those 300 and let everybody else go. Gideon did, and then Gideon used those 300 with a bunch of torches covered by pots, by some kind of pitchers there. And they split into 3 units of 100 people each, and they surrounded the Midianites. And God had told Gideon the night before, if you're still in doubt about this whole thing, go on down there and just listen to them. Just listen to what's on their mind, what they're all thinking about. And Gideon did. He took his armor bearer, his servant down there, and they snuck into a trench near the camp of the Midianites, and they could hear that one of them had a dream and said, a barley loaf in my dream came through smashing tents in the Midianite camp. And one of the other guys said, this cannot be, like it literally can't be anything but the army of Gideon. The sword of Gideon and of God is upon us from this cheap, measly barley loaf that we have come to associate with these people that we've been starving out, because that's what they did. They'd come down once a year. The host of the Midianites was like locusts on the ground. They would take all the crops, wipe everything out, and then they would leave the Israelites to live in their caves and try and regrow everything until they'd come back the next year and wipe them all out. So they are living now in fear that Gideon and the sword of God has come upon them, or is about to come upon them. And when Gideon hears that, he goes back and he says, all right, all you guys, we're going to split into 3 groups. You're going to take the torches, put them under the pitchers. And when I say the word, when you see me give the signal, everybody's smashing their pitcher to where your torch shines out in the middle of the night, and then you're going to yell, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And 300 men are going to do that, surrounding this army that is still, 135,000? 135,000? Golly. And in the middle of all that, when they smashed everything, God, what's the D word we've been using? Discomfited. God discomfited these people. He caused confusion among their ranks. They started grabbing their swords in the middle of the night and getting out of their tents and hacking and slashing and stabbing without ever really looking at who they were hacking and slashing and stabbing. And when they came to their senses, they said, oh man, I've been hacking and slashing and stabbing my fellow Midianites. And when they saw that and came to their senses and they saw how many people had died, they scattered. And then Gideon called for all of the tribes to come down out of the hills and say, hey, Y'all set up some men at the bodies of water, cut them off at the Jordan. We don't want to let these men escape. Set up some men, and we're going to catch them. We've got to chase these people down. And then I think didn't he get the princes at the very end of it? I can't remember. This is my problem. I lose track over that. Yeah, he got and they took 2 princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeb, and they slew Oreb upon the rock of Oreb, and Zeb they slew at the winepress of Zeb, and pursued the Midian, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon on the other side Jordan. And again, this is not a coincidence. This was written after the fact. So it was just a rock and a wine press, but when you slay Oreb and Zeb at a rock and a wine press, that rock and wine press become known as the rock of Oreb and the wine press of Zeb from then on out. And that brings us to chapter 8. Everybody caught up? Any questions? I didn't think there would be. Y'all such a good group. Chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. And the men of Ephraim said unto him, Why hast thou served us thus, that thou callest us not when thou wentest to fight with the Midianites? And they did chide with him sharply. And he said unto them, What have I done now in comparison of you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God hath delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb, and what was I able to do in comparison of you? Then their anger was abated toward him when he had said that. So Gideon beat the army of the Midianites soundly, and after that battle was over and he returned home, he didn't find the warm welcome he might have been expecting. The men of the tribe of Ephraim came up to him, and they did chide with him sharply. And that's some aggressive language in the Hebrew there. It was a mob that greeted him. They were violent and angry towards him. They felt neglected. They felt insulted that as big as they were and as strong a tribe as they were, it was offensive that they were not asked to join in the fight against the Midianites. And keep in mind, Gideon was of the tribe of Manasseh. Now, these guys that are complaining are the tribe of Ephraim. Manasseh and Ephraim are the twin tribe of Joseph. That's it. When it was 12 tribes of Israel, and it's always been 12 tribes of Israel, but they split off. The Levites got absolutely no kind of inheritance because God was their inheritance, so they didn't get land, but the tribe of Joseph was so large that it split into Manasseh and Ephraim. So the twin tribes of Joseph are the two that are arguing here. So what Gideon's really dealing with here is jealousy. The two half tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim that descended from Joseph, one of them doesn't feel like it's getting the glory that it should be getting. And they're not. But Gideon answers them with complete humility. He says, compared to you guys, what have I really done? Surely I haven't done a whole bunch here. He says, I just killed some soldiers. You guys got the heads of the princes. You guys got Oreb and Zeb. And that's what it means there, that phrase. It says, the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim, the small acts of the tribe of Ephraim to which Gideon belonged, are better than the whole, the whole vintage of Gideon's own family. So they were Ephraim, he was Manasseh. But what he's saying is that the gleaning, the little bit of what you have done, far outweigh the whole entire thing that I have managed to do. You guys killed princes, I killed mere soldiers. So even though your acts were few, they were far greater than what I have been able to do here. Because Gideon belonged to the Abizarites. So what is it? It's odded weirdly, and I don't want to get it. Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim, what little you, the tribe of Ephraim, have done, better than the vintage of Abiezer? The vintage being the whole crop of grapes that my own family has done there. And it appeased the mob to say something like this. It's completely humble. He's saying, you guys didn't do a whole lot, but what you did was 10 times greater than what I did, and that calmed them down. Verses 4 through 9. And Gideon came to Jordan and passed over, he and the 300 men that were with him, faint, yet pursuing them. And he said unto the men of Succoth, Give, I pray you, loaves of bread unto the people that follow me, for they be faint, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. And the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hand, that we should give bread unto thine army? And Gideon said, Therefore, when the Lord hath delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into mine hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. And he went up thence to Penuel, and spake unto them likewise. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered him. And he spake also unto the men of Penuel, saying, When I come again in peace, I will break down this tower. So the first 3 verses of this chapter that we looked at, what we just read, those are kind of a side note. Here in verse 4, it goes right back to the action that we left off at the end of chapter 7. So at the end of chapter 7, it's talking about Oreb and Zeb and pursuing. And then here it goes back to Gideon being in hot pursuit of the remnants of this army here. So the Midianites, and remember we talked about this, they're not Canaanites. When the Israelites came up to the promised land, they came up on the east side of the Jordan. God dried up the Jordan for them to cross over, and that's when they set up the 12 stones and everything, but he brought them over into Canaan. That's how they approached the land of Canaan. They came from the south up east of it and then crossed west over into Canaan. The Midianites are who they fought before they crossed over the Jordan. So this is a foreign people. They're not in Canaan. It's a foreign invader that God brought into this land to oppress the Israelites. So now those people are retreating home, so they're going back over the Jordan. That means going eastward, over that river, which is why Gideon told all the men at the end of chapter 7, he said, post men up, take control of the Jordan, take control of and there was one other body of water. He said, don't let these men escape. Don't let them get in boats. Don't let them get in ferries or whatever. Take control of the bodies of water there, because it'll naturally bottleneck the retreat of this army here. And they got mostly everybody, but not everybody. So now Gideon and his 300 men, who have done a lot of fighting, a whole bunch of fighting, and a lot of pursuing, a lot of running on foot. They're chasing what's left of the army and its princes across the Jordan, and they're wore out. So they come upon the town of Succoth. And it's not our first time to see this town. That name means stalls or booths. We first saw that town mentioned back in Genesis 33 when Jacob returned home to confront Esau, which he thought was going to be this horrible, violent altercation because of the way that he had left things so long ago after stealing Esau's birthright and then headed up north to find himself a wife after his mom said, get out of here, your brother's going to kill you. And then he went up north and he went through everything with his father-in-law and came back down south with a couple of wives in tow and a bunch of children, because they kept having the birthing wars as he was traveling back down south. And then when he finally gets here and he starts sending out gifts, a trail of sheep and cattle and servants and everything to meet his brother, to appease him, to abate his anger before they actually meet face to face. And his brother, when they finally meet, he says, what is all this stuff? And he goes, these are gifts for you. And he said, I don't need the gifts. I'm so glad to have you here. And they embrace. It's not nearly the violent thing that Jacob was making it out in his head to be. Well, back in Genesis 33, Esau told Jacob, come stay with me, but Jacob said, no, I'm not going to stay with you. There's no reason to crowd everybody. And then in 33 verses 16 and 17, so that day Esau started on his way back to Seir, but Jacob went on to Succoth, where he built a house for himself and shelters for his livestock. That is why the place was called Succoth. So this town's been around a while. It was originally started whenever Jacob said, no, Esau, you go back to the mountains. I'm going to start over here. And he took all of his family and he started building places for all of the immense amounts of, ring-straked and spotted and all the different cattle and sheep and stuff that he had taken from his father-in-law. He still had all of them, had to build a place for them, and that town just grew to Succoth. So initially, a few hundred years ago, this town was started when he needed stalls. Now, Gideon and his men, which again are just 300, they come upon the town of Succoth, and Gideon says, listen, guys, we're tired. Our spirits are willing, but our flesh is weak. We've been fighting. We've been pursuing. And Gideon says, we need bread to feed this meager army. And I do mean meager. It's a whole city, and he's only got 300 men. In the grand scheme of it, that's really not a whole lot. But he says, I need food and refreshment because we are hot in pursuit of Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of the Midianites, which were assumedly their common enemies too. Succoth wasn't in league with them. They had more in common with the Israelites than they did with the Midianites that were there. But how do they reply? They say, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hand, that we should give bread unto thine army? Do you have them? Are they in your custody? Do you have their hands in yours like you're carrying them away? Have you really had such victory over them that you can assure us that if we give you bread, they're not going to come back here and take vengeance on us after you lose? And Gideon doesn't do well with that refusal. He says, when God gives me victory over these men, when I've run down the kings of the Midianites, and I actually do have them in my custody, I'm coming back here, and I will tear your flesh with thorns and briars. And I know the hair on the back of my neck stands up a little on that too, because nothing, that's one of those things, I can handle bee stings and all sorts of grimy stuff, but the thought of like getting caught on rose bushes and things like that, and that rubs me weird. My wife can tell you I'm constantly damaging my hands, everything that I do. It doesn't matter what. Carrying yeah, she's shaking her head, yes. I was carrying a laundry basket into our hallway today, and I smacked my knuckle against the door frame there, and those things, I can't shake those off. It looks like I do, but it just really irks me down to my core there. The thought of my flesh being torn with thorns and briars. Now, we don't exactly know what that means either. The phrase he used to describe tearing their flesh, it's not used a lot, but when it is used, it is severe. And he might actually be using thorns and briars. This might be a euphemism for being flogged, for any number of tortures that would tear the flesh there. Whatever tool he has in mind, it's going to be bad. And so Gideon went on, and he arrived at Peniel, a city named by Jacob in Genesis 32. So that one goes back a few hundred years as well. Jacob said he had seen God face to face. That's what the name means, Peniel. Anytime you see El, remember, El means God is in the name, whenever you see that in a name there. Peniel is the face of God. And Gideon arrives at this town, and he says the very same thing to the men of Peniel, and he says, my men are tired, we're chasing after the kings of Midian, give us some food, refresh us a bit. But the men of Peniel answer him the exact same way as the men of Succoth, and Gideon replies in very much the same way. He says, I'm going to come back here one day in peace. I won't be looking for war anymore. I won't be in hot pursuit of my enemies, but I'm going to come back here and I'm going to settle this score. I will break down this tower. And Gideon said that because Peniel was a fortified city, and it did have a tower in the middle of it. And that may have been why they felt so safe saying something like that to Gideon. Y'all ever get on the internet? You ever get in the comments section of a Facebook post? Those people feel a little safe, don't they? Knowing that they're locked away, miles away under some other IP address. They can say anything to you over there because they feel like they have that barrier in front of them. That kind of anonymity makes them all sorts of brave to be able to say, no, you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. That's the same thing here. This is a big fortified city with a tower, and they're looking at Gideon and saying, we know all about you, but guess what? We got a tower. Leave before I taunt you again. Now, Gideon told them directly, when I've wrapped up all this business, I'm coming back here, and I'm tearing this tower down that you're all so proud of. Verses 10 through 12. Now, Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their hosts with them, about 15,000 men, all that were left of all the hosts of the children of the east, for there fell 120,000 men that drew sword. And Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and smote the host, for the host was secure. And when Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued after them and took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and discomfited all the host. So Zebah and Zalmunna made their way to a city named Karkor. Karkor literally means a safe enclosure. So another well-fortified city. And the two kings that had made their way there with what was left of their army, and like I said last week, this verse that we're quoting here, that we're reading through here, is the verse I was referencing to last week when I said we know they have 135,000 because they didn't mention the verse in the last chapter. They didn't mention the number, but here we can do the math. We know if they've got 120,000 dead and 15,000 with them, then we know in the previous verse they had in the previous chapter they had 135,000. So 120,000 died from the confusion of God, the discomfiting of the army there, and then the pursuit thereafter. That's amazing. That's a tremendous amount of men. Not only to take their own lives back and forth there, but then to be chased down. And so he's left with 15,000, these two kings of Midian. So when Gideon catches up with them, it's still 15,000 though, so he still has work to do. It's still 300 against 15,000. And by human standards, those still aren't great odds. But the last time, Gideon had the advantage because, God had plagued the Midianite army with visions and rumors of Gideon and the terror of God and the dreams at night. This time, he still has the advantage. You know why? Yes, God is still on his side, working to discomfit the enemy, because we see that in verse 12 there. It says God discomfited, and that does have with it the connotation of some kind of divine intervention associated with it. Anytime we see that, it's talking about the sun standing in the sky or chariot wheels falling off, or hailstones or something like that whenever we see discomfited. So yes, he still has that, but also this time around, the Midianite army is not expecting a fight. This time, he still has the advantage because they think they're secure. It says it in verse 11. Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents in the east of Nobah and Jogbeha and smote the host, for the host was secure. They were bedded down safe. They thought there's no way Gideon was going to pursue them this far. We're clear on the other side of the Jordan now. They found their way to a nice city. They probably didn't all fit inside this nice city. Most of them were probably camped outside, but it's still a sense of being safe. They're so far removed from the fighting that took most of the army, and they're taking it easy now. They've got nothing to worry about. And it wouldn't shock me if they're, drinking, partying, honoring the fallen, celebrating being alive, celebrating that of the 120,000 that died, they're still alive. If there's a reason to celebrate, that might be it. But Gideon didn't take the main road. He didn't take the way that they would see him coming, where all the lookouts were posted. So they had no notice. He traveled by the route of the Bedouins, the nomads, the desert people. He traveled in a roundabout way. He came by the way of the desert, and he attacked the army not only when they weren't expecting it, but also from a direction from where they would not expect an attack. And when they attack, we see that discomfited word. Once again, they discomfited the host. And that typically means, they did fight really hard, but they also had the hand of God, divine intervention in the battle. It's still, again, 300 versus 15,000. So they need a little help. And seeing their army crumble at the hand of 300 men, at the hand of God Almighty, discomfiting them, though we don't know how, Zebah and Zalmunna fled. A second time, they said, that's it, we're out of here. But this time, they didn't get away. So verses 13 through 17. Whoa.
When you have 120,000 dead bodies, just how do you handle that? I mean, I'm just saying, it doesn't say that they took time to bury, it doesn't say that they took time to do this or to do that.
More than likely burned them. They would have people, they would.
But
The army would walk off and leave them. The people left behind would pillage them. We see in a little bit here that they've gathered up all of the earrings and nose rings of these people because they do something with that. So they go through the bodies and make sure, oh, that's a nice sword, that's a nice earring, this whatever. They plunder what they can, but then after that,
The disease factor
there you are.
would be so high if they didn't, even to the army that was leaving, if they didn't take care of these. And all through the chapters, you see where they kill thousands and thousands and thousands. And this was at one time, this 120,000 killed. And it's just, well,
Well, it's not the work of the soldiers. They're going on pursuing. But there was still a lot of people left behind of the Canaanite army. I mean, God boiled it down to 300, so the ones that were left behind needed something to do. And I would imagine if it's nearby, well, if it's near a city, that city's going to take it upon themselves to clear things out. You don't want them just out there in the desert, again, because of disease, because of animals, because of, all sorts of nastiness. Yes. Buzzards. There you go. Animals have, yes, Linda. We can't. we.
it just seems like such massive, well, you know when 9/11 happened, and we had all the machinery, and we had all this advanced technology and everything, that it took days and days and days to clear out the rubble and get the bodies and everything like this. And they didn't have any of that, and it just seems like that this would be such a huge obstacle deal to handle.
Well, I mean, it'd be the same logistics as the Black Plague or something like that. When people are piling up in the streets, you start getting people with carts to haul them off and burn them somewhere. You designate places. It's not.
The Battle of Manassas in the Civil War, there were 22,000 Americans killed one day. I mean, those things in that one day, Gettysburg, all of those were thousands and thousands of people. Most of them were thrown into a large ditch that you couldn't take time to bury them.
Sure. We can get darker. All right, fine. Verses 13 through 17. And Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from battle before the sun was up, and caught a young man of the man of Succoth, and inquired of him, and he described unto him the princes of Succoth, and the elders thereof, even 17 men. And he came unto the men of Succoth, and said, Behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, with whom ye did upbraid me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hand, that we should give bread unto thy men that are weary? And he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness, and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. And he beat down the tower of Penuel, and slew the men of the city. Reckoning. Before the sun was up. So we know Gideon, on top of everything else, attacked at night once again whenever he attacked Zebah and Zalmunna. So he did it from a desert road, not from the main thoroughfare, and he did it at night. And we know he did that because now the next verse says, before the sun was up on that attack when he had Zebah and Zalmunna. When the fighting was done, the 15,000 that were left were discomfited. The kings of Midian were taken. Gideon captured a young man of the town of Succoth and asked him exactly about the men that were responsible for denying him refreshment when they were in dire need. He's not out to punish the whole town. He's not out to raise the whole town to the ground. He wants to find who specifically was responsible for the decision to turn away his army, his men in need, and punish those people. And he finds out from the young man he captured that the ruling council, that the elders of the city, is 77 men, 70. And I can only imagine the guy they captured in the face of 300 battle-hardened men and the fabled Gideon staring him down. I imagine he is telling them absolutely anything and everything that he can possibly think of about the men of Succoth, where they live, their middle names, their favorite colors, their daily habits, absolutely everything. I doubt he held anything back. They get the full download, and when they go to the city, they had no problem just taking the elders of Succoth and saying, you remember me. Wasn't too long ago I came here and you chided me. You made fun of me. You said, do you have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your hand? Well, guess what? I do. And he went and got, and again, we don't know if it's a euphemism because we don't see this phrase really used in the Bible elsewhere. So we're kind of guessing in the translation of this. Whatever he did with them was bad. It says he took thorns and briars of the wilderness, thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them taught the men of Succoth. And again, when it says taught the men of Succoth, what that means exactly is kind of up for debate too. Because if he just tortured these men, if he just beat them thoroughly with thorns and briars, beat them soundly, tore some flesh, and then let them go, then those are the people that he taught, right? He taught them a lesson. He beat them. If it was more severe than that, if he took it a little further, if he whipped 77 men to death, then he taught the men of Succoth still, just not those 77 men. There's still a lesson in this. Those 77 guys sure learned it, but the people that are still in the town, this next council, it could very well be saying that he taught those men. We don't know what antecedent to attach to that pronoun there. Either way, they're learning. They're learning that when God raises up a judge in Israel to restore his people, get out of the way. If you can help, but certainly don't get in his way. So regardless, either way, lessons were learned. And then Gideon went straight on to Penuel and beat down the tower of that city, and it says he slew the men of that city. We don't know how many, we don't know which ones, but the fact that he slew them lends credibility to the thought that maybe he thrashed the men of Succoth to death. If he was going to kill all the men in Penuel, it doesn't quite make sense, maybe not. I don't know, there's an argument that can be made every way that he would beat them severely in Succoth, but kill the people in Penuel. Maybe he killed the people in Succoth and the people in Penuel, but we're not told exactly. Either way, he got his reckoning. The people that denied the army of God in their pursuit of the people that had been oppressing the Israelites, they saw justice. They saw God's hand descend on them just like this. Yes? All the men?
Ever since this journey started, one of the themes that keeps coming back is you're supposed to wipe out these people, but they end up, it might be the crops, it might be the altars, it might be something. There's something.
We've had a couple, in Jericho they did wipe everybody out except for Rahab, but then they took something that was dedicated towards corruption, and that's what led to the defeat at Ai. But then after they sorted that out, at Ai they had complete victory. But through Canaan, it's when they were doing the conquest of Canaan, yeah, there were a handful of places where they didn't follow through. But a lot of them they did, too. They just didn't finish the job. So no, not the first time, but an important one. And I say that we don't know for sure if they slew everybody. It says slew the men of the city. So there's enough left interpretation there that it may not have been everybody. Just like when it says that everybody went out to see the show, or everybody did this. We speak sometimes in hyperbole, knowing what we mean, but without exactly counting or doing the figures on it.
But these two towns, they weren't in the promised land, were they? They were on the other side.
No, they weren't. They're not in Canaan. These are back towards, they're chasing after the Midianites on the other side of Jordan. Yeah. So they've never approached these lands before. All good? Verses, where are we at? 18 through 21. Then said he unto Zebah and Zalmunna, what manner of men were they whom ye slew at Tabor? And they answered, as thou art, so were they. Each one resembled the children of a king. And he said, They were my brethren, even the sons of my mother. As the Lord liveth, if ye had saved them alive, I would not slay you. And he said unto Jethro his firstborn, Up and slay them. But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared, because he was yet a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise thou, and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose and slew Zebah and Zalmunna, and took away the ornaments that were on their camels' necks. So here we read of Gideon interrogating the kings of Midian about either a battle about which we have no prior knowledge, something that hasn't been mentioned in the Bible, or it's a personal event where for some unknown reason they saw fit to kill some men. He asked the kings of Midian, do you remember Tabor? You remember the battle at Tabor? Do you remember the kind of men that you killed there? What kind of men were they? And they say, well, they were a lot like you. They were large-statured. They were stately men. They had a royal bearing about them. And Gideon says to them, yeah, that's because they were my brothers. Nope, nothing. Tabor, no. Do you remember Tabor? No. So he's not using the word brethren loosely, because he says, brethren, even the sons of my mother. His actual brothers were at Tabor. And again, we don't know if this was a battle or if this was a feud or just some weird altercation or a bar brawl or whatever it was. Whatever it was, these two kings ended up killing some of Gideon's brothers. So Gideon, before he has his way with them, says, do you guys remember Tabor? You remember the guys you killed there? Did they look anything like me? And they go, yeah, they kind of looked like you. And he goes, that's right, because they were my brothers. Now, if it had been battle, Gideon might be seeking some kind of general vengeance, but it wouldn't really be personal because all of that happens in the heat of battle, and for whatever reason it's been enjoyed. You can't hold a war like that or a battle like that personal down to a single person. But if it were a personal matter where the brothers of Gideon had been singled out for some reason and killed specifically by the kings of Midian, if that were the case, Gideon may well consider that to be murder, in which case he's acting as the avenger of blood, and he has, in that case, a right of this traditional right. You remember the cities of refuge we've been talking about? Whenever someone in your family gets killed, there was a tradition among those people, the Middle Eastern people, that you could hunt down the person who had killed them, and you could kill that person. And that's why they made the cities of refuge and spread them throughout Canaan. He tells the kings, if you had kept these guys alive, I wouldn't be killing you now. Which, again, leads a bit more credence to the thought that this may all not have been in the heat of battle, but may have been something a bit more selective in their violence towards his brothers. But then something interesting happens too. Gideon looks at his firstborn son, Jethro, and he says, all right, son, you're up. Kill these guys. It's your time to shine. How old are you? 12? Get in there. Now, why? We don't really know. He may have been wanting to honor his son, to let him have the glory of the victory of actually executing the kings of Midian. It may have been a rite of passage of sorts, some kind of ritual into manhood that he was doing. He may have wanted to impress upon his son the importance of their endeavors to serve God, of going to whatever length was required to serve God and whatever their calling was. It wasn't unusual. It's not shameful. This was part of victory. This was a normal practice of the times, and lest we forget, too, don't go all soft-hearted on me here. The Midianites were wicked, evil people. These are a wicked, paganite, child-sacrificing, Baal-worshiping people. It's not like they're innocent in all of this. Far from. God has decided to bring Gideon upon them. And if their sins were not wicked, God would not have risen up somebody as lethal as Gideon to exact vengeance on them. This is executing the two kings of the same pagan nation that sought to pollute Israel through idolatry, through sexual immorality, whenever the wicked prophet, Balaam. There we are, Balaam. Yeah. Balaam came through and he said, you don't need to attack the Israelites. And it was King Balak. Balak. There we go. Yeah. I'm picturing that word and how to spell it, but there's too many A's in my head, I think. So Balaam was talking to Balak and he said, you don't need to attack them head on. It's a giant army. You can pollute them. And we don't find it out when it's happening. We find it out after the fact, after Balaam is actually killed. And that's what happened when that one Israelite, that prince among the Israelites, brought a Midianite woman into his own tent in the midst of the Israelites and was seemingly laying with her because he got run through with a javelin and it pierced both of them at the same time. And that would be a little difficult to do if they were on opposite ends of the room courting. It wasn't formal like that. They were in physical congress and got skewered through there. That's what the Midianites were doing. These aren't innocent people here. It's not a stretch to say that God had deemed them deserving of death. Had he not, he would not have been discomfiting their army at every possible turn. So Gideon looks at his kid and he says, get up and kill these two men, but his kid couldn't do it. And the kings see the boy hesitate, and they look to Gideon and they ask him to do it. All right, so don't read that like I read that for so many years. It says, Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise thou and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. They're not telling the boy, don't falter. Go ahead and kill us. Be a man. That's not what they're saying. They're seeing this shaky kid with a sword, thinking he's about to cut our heads off, and I don't think he's got the strength to do it in one whack. And they look to Gideon, and they say, you do it. Rise up. When they say, as a man, for as the man is, so is his strength, they're saying, you look like you're strong enough to do this. As the man you are, so is your strength, but we don't quite trust him. So don't think they're talking to the youth. They're talking to Gideon. They say, you get up and you do this job, carry out the sentence. And Gideon does. Gideon killed the two men, and then he went and he snatched the gold chains off the necks of their camels. I don't know why. A lot of people think it's because a lot of the gold chains back then would actually have moons. They would have symbols, the pagan symbols of their pagan gods, astral bodies, and other such idolatry on them that they would wear as ornaments on their horses and camels as they rode along. Verses 22 and 23. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, rule thou over us, both thou and thy son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Hallelujah. Somebody gets it, right? They don't hang on to the thought for too long in Israel, but somebody, at least for now, gets it. All the military victories of this whole campaign to free the Israelites by God's hand, 300 against 135,000. But this is arguably the greatest act of Gideon. When the people saw the kind of man he was, that he was strong, that he was blessed of God, that he was righteous and even-tempered and finally even brave, they approach him to make him king, not just a judge, but a king, a dynastic ruler. You're going to be king, and then your kid after you, and then your kid after him, they'll be king. We're going to set up your household to be king, children and children's children. But Gideon would not take the place of God in the lives of the Israelites. They had a king. They had the king. And he tells them, that's what you need. It's not me. You don't need a man for this. God is your king. So Gideon would not have it, which is a great testament to his character. And when we go through the book of Judges here, all the judges seem to have some kind of flaw with them. And Gideon, and he's about to mess up here, if I'm being honest. It gets a little weird here towards the end. But Gideon, for now, looking at these people, has his mind and his heart right and says, I know you want to make me God because you think I've done something great, or you want to make me king because I've done something great, but all along it's been God. It hasn't been me. I had 300 men. You think I could actually take down 135,000 on my own? Your actual king is God, and he's been doing a bang-up job. Y'all need to keep him. Don't switch to me. I just now found my bravery. But then something weird happened. Verses 24 through 27. And Gideon said unto them, I would desire a request of you, that ye would give me every man the earrings of his prey. For they had golden earrings, because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, We will willingly give them. And they spread a garment, and did cast therein every man the earrings of his prey. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside ornaments and collars and purple raiment that was on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that were about their camels' necks. And Gideon made an ephod thereof, and put it in his city, even in Ophrah. And all Israel went thither a-whoring after it, which thing became a snare unto Gideon and to his house. Well, crud. we're doing so great. So Gideon seemed to like gold. Snatched it right off the camels' necks after they said, we're going to make you king. And he said, no, but you know what you can do? There's 135 dead guys over there, and they've all got piercings. And before you burn their bodies or bury them or whatever you're going to do with them, will you go get all their earrings, all the earrings that you have pillaged, all their nose rings, and because the word is just rings. It's not specifically earrings. It may have been nose rings as well. But he says, get all this gold, gather it. They said, we'll happily do that for you. That sounds fine. And they spread out a blanket. Every man goes back to his tent or to his camel or his horse. They gather up the gold, and they throw them on the blanket, and Gideon collected about 50 pounds of gold, is about what it says there, of the earrings. And that's beside the chains and the clothing and things like that we're talking about, the pearls and the raiment. The Israelites seemed to think it fair that this man, who they were going to just make king, all he really wants is a tribute. So they're happy to give this. But Gideon takes all of this gold, and he makes a tribute, an ephod. And I doubt all of it, because it's 50 pounds of gold and a 50-pound ephod. Y'all remember what an ephod is? When they had the high priest, and we talked about that in Exodus, it's a chest plate that would be worn. It was buckled with, I want to say, with onyx stones on the shoulders, and then it had a rectangle right here with 12 stones on it, one for each of the tribes of Israel. And behind it, there was a pouch for the Urim and the Thummim, the lots that the high priest would cast to have God's input on decisions on occasion there. And that was specifically for the high priest. It talked about the high priest had that, and then it talked about all the other priests pretty much just got linen garments and a belt. They didn't get all the fancy stuff, but he had the big plate right there. He had the head covering, he had the ephod, he had the robes, he had everything. Well, Gideon makes this ephod, and again, I doubt he used all of the gold he collected, because that would be a 50-pound chest plate, and that would be hard. I was at the chiropractor with my wife this morning, and I know she's up there. She doesn't like when I talk about her sometimes, but she wears a lead apron in her job. She takes x-rays, and it weighs on you. It pulls you forward. It hurts your back. It hurts your shoulders, especially if you do that for 8 hours a day. And that's not near 50 pounds. So I don't imagine, again, that this was a 50-pound breastplate. But he took a lot of the gold that he had, and he made an ephod of it. So what's the problem with that? It's for the priest. God has already prescribed an ephod. We've got one. He gave very clear directions on how it was to be made, who it was for, when it was to be used. It was gold. It had 12 precious stones. It held the Urim and the Thummim. It was special. And nothing could be gained from having a second ephod. In fact, the only thing it could possibly do is take away from the first ephod, the one that God actually said you should have, the true ephod. It's very similar to the episode we saw not long ago after they had conquered Canaan and they had distributed all of the land. The Israelites had been given the land of east of the Jordan, the tribe of Gad and of Manasseh, and one other, I can't remember. Was it Asher? There are 3 tribes that had land on the east side of Jordan, because they said, this is good land for cattle. We got cattle. We're going to leave our wives and our cattle here. We'll go fight with you, and then we'll come back. Before they made it back to their homes, after all of the lots had been cast for the different land allotments there, they set up an altar. You You remember that? They set up an altar on a hillside overlooking the river Jordan, very similar to the altar in the tabernacle, strikingly similar to it. And what happened when they did that? The other tribes of Israel got word of it, and they started strapping on their swords. They were preparing to battle their own brethren over an altar they had made. And they confronted them. They had a sit-down talk, and they said, no, this isn't an altar. We're not going to sacrifice here. We just wanted something so that our kids in our generation would be able to look back at your kids in your generation. We wouldn't be cut off from the children of Israel, being that we're on the east side of the Jordan, that we would somewhat feel connected through this altar. And eventually they said, oh, okay, fine. We're not going to go to war. But that altar, the thought of a poor replica of the altar that God had already specifically described, the existence of that altar was enough for them to go to war with their own people. It's very similar to what we're seeing here. Gideon was the man of the hour. No one stopped him from having this ephod crafted. No one questioned it. No one questioned its purpose. And Gideon took it and he set it up in his own city. So this time, we have man's poor imitation of what God has prescribed, made out of gold, set up in the city of Ophrah, where Gideon lived. And what happened after that? All Israel, forgive the poor language, all Israel went thither a whoring after it, which thing became a snare unto Gideon and to his house. The ephod led to idolatry. Led to idolatry in the land. It became a snare to the house of Gideon, to his line. A spirit of superiority and greed had seemingly planted itself into Gideon, led his children into the fall of his children and his house, which we're going to see in the next chapter here. Verses 28 through 35. Oh, this is it, ain't it? Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more. And the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon. And Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon had 70 sons of his body begotten, for he had many wives. And his concubine that was in Shechem, she also bare him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age, and was buried in the sepulchre of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abizrites. And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Balaam, and made Baal-berith their god. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of all their enemies on every side. Neither showed they kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, namely Gideon, according to all the goodness for which he had showed unto Israel. So for 40 years, Gideon continued to rule the Israelites as their judge, not their king, but as their judge, though as we see here, he was pretty much acting every bit like their king. He just wouldn't take on the title. The Midianites had been soundly beaten, did not lift up their heads throughout his whole reign. So he had peace in the land. Was he perfect? No, you can say it. No, he wasn't perfect. Far from. The ephod thing was already one strike against him, but then we find out he also fell to the sin of polygamy. Had 70 sons by a bunch of different wives and one concubine, at least one concubine. One concubine mentioned, at least one. The name of that son was Abimelech, and he's the subject of the whole next chapter. And that Gideon kept the people in line as long as he lived. He died at a good old age. We're not told exactly what that age was. And then he was buried in his family's tomb with his father Ophrah. But as soon as he was dead, before his body got cold, Israel left following God. They forgot about God. They forgot about Gideon. They forgot about every good thing that he had ever done for them. And they started going back to following the Baals and went a-whoring after the Baals and set up Baal-berith. And that's what happens in chapter 9. It goes into Abimelech and the downfall of that house. All right, and we're right on time, aren't we? Do I think what now?
Did he know
it's hard to pry into the motivations of something like he might have felt really good about himself having denied taking on the kingship, that he was allowed, some little bit of moral gray area. It's which sounds bad, but that's how we all kind of operate, isn't it? Any of y'all ever go on a diet? Yeah, a lot of chuckling here. You have a good lunch? You have a good dinner? You deserve a little treat, don't you? You've been good. You've denied yourself for so long. You made some good decisions. Why not spoil yourself just a little bit? And again, that's just a layman's guess into the mindset of Gideon. You can't really tell. Jesse?
So he had how many wives, did you say?
70 kids. 70 kids by a whole bunch of wives. So at least one. Really tired. That's it. I don't, yeah. Yeah, no, in Israeli tradition, they don't mention the daughters there in the, okay.